There's an awful lot going on this week in the world of online safety and digital harms, particularly affecting under 16-year-olds. So I wanted to just have a little look at the evidence and consider what these potentially new legislation is going to have and what may happen when it takes effect. Keir Starmer made an announcement that under 16s will be banned off social media. Very broad term, social media, and we've yet to find out the details. We do have a little bit of an indicative timeline though, is that this legislation should be passed before Christmas and that the changes should come into effect in kind of springtime next year. Now, this has been kind of labelled Australia plus model, but Australia is really the only region that we've got to go on and to see, has this been effective in dealing with some of the challenges that are faced by young people online, and has it actually reduced any harm? So if we have a little look at what we can learn from Australia, how it's been implemented, what's actually happening, what those details look like, then maybe we can get a little bit of a glimpse into the future, and then we can consider, is this the right way to deal with online harms? Under 16 social media ban is only partially in force or partially effective so far. Platforms have removed millions of accounts, so they are complying, and some parents have reported benefits, but large numbers of under 16s are still on major apps, and harms have not fallen yet. There's been little to no documented impact, which is to be expected really, because a lot of what we see in online harms, it's really difficult to quantify anyway. It's one of the dark figures of crime. We often only really know about those online harms later on once they've played out, so when the impact is being felt by the young person, the individual, rather than in situ at the moment of first contact. So the law in Australia came into force in December 2025. It made it illegal for under 16-year-olds to hold accounts on 10 named platforms such as TikTok, YouTube, Reddit, X, Twitch, Kick, etc. The government and platform data indicates around 4.7 to 5 million under 16-year-old accounts were deactivated, removed or restricted in the first weeks to months after the implementation. Bear in mind that we are only just 6 months into this. Polling by YouGov in early 2026, so just a couple of months into the process, found that around 59% of Australian adults think the ban has been effective so far, indicating broad but cautious public support. But where it may not be working that well is that research and media reporting suggests that roughly 2/3 to 70% of under 16 still have access to major social media platforms. Despite the ban, they're often either evading or completely not encountering these age checks that should be in place. So not all platforms are being compliant, or if they are trying to be, maybe the application of these age checks is patchy. So the eSafety Commissioner in Australia's first compliance review criticised poor practices by Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok and YouTube, and they raised significant concerns about whether they're genuinely keeping under 16s off its services. Teens report using VPNs, lying about their age, moving to other apps and websites that are less regulated and not covered by this ban, which is inevitable. With any time we ban something, displacement always follows. This was entirely anticipated by digital rights and child safety researchers, because when you actually get into the details of what a ban means and what it looks like, there is loads of data, loads of research and loads of examples, from prohibition of alcohol to banning or legislating against things like abortion. We know that when something is banned, it doesn't stop the thing from happening. It moves to somewhere where it can freely occur. So whether that's geographical location, whether it's platform location, but the activity moves, it doesn't stop. And when the activity moves, it often goes into areas of the world where it's much more difficult to regulate. So rather than a ban, campaigners and researchers often talk about creating safer digital infrastructures. So not banning entirely, because let's face it, when our young people now go into the workforce, we expect them to be incredibly digitally literate. We also have a lot of parents who use screen time to help manage their child's behaviour, education, etc. I think when we think about banning social media or banning these apps for young people, we're often thinking about those kind of pre-teen, teenage years, not necessarily the toddler that's watching Bluey or Miss Rachel on their iPad whilst their mum gets ready for work in the morning. Those are the types of things that there'll essentially be no marketplace for anymore because children can't watch in those avenues. So there is a bit of a debate around taking those choices out of parents' hands by operating a market ban. Why can't we make the internet and online platforms a safer place across the board, not just social media, but anywhere where there is user created content? Why can't we regulate and police the internet? Well, it's really difficult to do. In Australia, going back to the benefits, clinical services have said that it's too early to say whether there's been any robust mental health signals, whether it's increased welfare or happiness. The data's really limited and there's a longer observation window that's needed. So Australia is not necessarily, apart from public opinion, is not really experiencing any of the benefits yet. Doesn't mean that they're not there, but they're not observable just yet. Headspace sources, though, have reported that around 10% of adolescents presenting to them for mental health support mention the ban as part of why they're seeking help. So we can see that there's, whilst it's not clearly positive or clearly negative, we can see that there's young people who really use social media as an outlet for socialising, for maintaining relationships, who are now struggling because they've lost that avenue to potentially help with their mental health. I think this is really pertinent after lockdown. You've got to remember we've got whole generations who were forced to maintain their friendships and their relationships online, even if they weren't really online kids before then. They became online kids or they lost their social networks. So a ban like this seems particularly cruel in the context of that type of relationship forming that was pushed on them because of huge international lockdowns. So I think we haven't really unpicked what it means to be a digital citizen under the age of 16, but now through fear we are banning it. I'm a mum of 5. I'm not here to say that a social media ban would not be a good or a bad thing, but I am a researcher and I'm here to look at the evidence to see, are we going down the right path? And as with most things, when we ban something, as I've said, we just displace elsewhere. And what I'm really concerned as a criminologist is about that displacement. I want to create a safe online space for all, not just on those major platforms where we think, oh, we can police the majority and then those fringe cases won't matter as much. Those fringe cases will become seriously important because what's going to happen is our young people won't be able to contact each other on TikTok or things like that. They'll go and consume media and messaging elsewhere in spaces and environments that aren't moderated, that aren't regulated. Parents have a different view though. In Australia, YouGov's March 2026 surveys of parents of children under the age of 16 found that 61% had noticed 2 to 4 positive behavioural changes since the ban. So including more in-person socialising, around 43%, a greater presence and engagement in the household, and improved parent relationships, around 38%. There is a perceived positive impact by parents, at least, even if young people themselves are not recognising that and are asking for mental health support directly related to the ban. However, some parents did also report 2 to 4 negative effects, including increased digital inequality, around 27%, and shifts to these more risky and less regulated platforms. There's also this reduced social connection, creativity or peer support online was really seen by about a quarter of those surveyed to be really impactful in a negative way. In education, some schools observed very little difference because they'd already restricted phone use whilst in school anyway, as most have. But students reported that they just regrouped elsewhere, mostly on gaming platforms, messaging apps or overseas hosted services that are not tightly age gated. Displacement in practice. As with myself, most child safety and digital rights experts argue that this policy is a blunt instrument and that by itself it will not fix the core harms that drive young people to more opaque, less moderated spaces and therefore experiencing potentially more harm. Amnesty International actually labelled the ban as an ineffective quick fix, arguing that more promising levers are enforceable safety by design rules, stronger data protection laws, and systemic obligations on all users, not just minors, which I completely support. UNICEF Australia similarly stresses that the ban alone will not address young people's online risks, and emphasis education support on platform-wide preventions are what is necessary. So we put all of this together then and think about what lessons can we learn from Australia and bring towards this new news here in the UK. We need to think about enforcement effectiveness. That's been moderate at best. There's been lots of cosmetic account removals, but high levels of circumventing and uneven platform compliance is what we've seen. From a safety and wellbeing impact, it's too early for us to make strong causal claims. There's mixed signals with both reported benefits and harms, and no clear fall in key indicators like cyberbullying yet. A systemic assessment on current evidence, it looks like an incomplete, leaky intervention that may need to be coupled with age-appropriate design standards, school and family-led measures, and stronger regulatory powers that to have any substantial long-term input. Now, we don't really know if what the UK is proposing is going to be exactly the same as Australia, but we are talking about this kind of Australia plus model, so it'd be really interesting to see what that actually can look like. I mean, what looks like is being proposed so far is moving to ban under 16s from high-risk social media, plus restrict harmful features on safer apps. The Primary Online Safety Act is in force. Specifically, under 16 social media measures are in consultation. So if we come back to the UK then, and what this potentially looks like and where it may differ from the Australian model, is that they're canvassing for stronger default age assurances where services want to offer high-risk features to under 18s. Also a potential requirement that high-risk social media use highly effective age checks before a child can access the service at all. Ministers are invoking Australia as a proof of age assurance-backed bans are workable, but again, there's a lot of critique as to whether the Australian model has just meant that there's a lack of enforcement, or it's been really difficult to police and young people are circumventing it anyway. The UK already has the age-appropriate design code, or the children's code, at a data protection level, but the new measures would sit on top of this, potentially making age assurance expectations more prescriptive than in Australia. Both use under 16s as the anchor age for stronger restrictions, and both Australia and the UK place legal responsibility squarely on the platforms, not on the young people or parents, enforced by an independent regulator with large fine powers. Both are going to rely on age assurance technologies and risk-based rules. Now, I'm highlighting all this not to be completely dismissive of the ban, but I think we need to go into it with our eyes wide open. Whatever we do next, there will be a circumvention or this kind of displacement from social media platforms and displacement of harm. One of the key things for me is that a lot of harm already happens on apps that will just not fall into the remit of this ban. But because the narrative will be that this ban is in place, we will, as a public, as society, potentially feel very protected because it's all right, our young people aren't online. And actually, they just won't be online in the spaces that potentially have the most power to make the safest online experience possible. So places like Meta, YouTube, they have the resources to implement technologies to essentially police and eradicate harm off their platforms. Now, maybe if they'd done that already, we wouldn't be facing these type of bans. Or maybe actually what we're doing is cutting key technology partners off from this conversation and making it not their problem because they don't have young people on their platforms. Therefore, some of the brightest minds in the technology online safety space and the most well-resourced platforms to help with this are going to be no longer part of the conversation. Lots of things to consider, and obviously it's all still emerging, but I just wanted to kind of collect those thoughts together and see if maybe the UK can learn from the gaps in Australian policy. But at the moment, we haven't got a view of what this will actually look like, and it will emerge over time. So follow me if you would like more updates in the online safety space to figure out where the harm is and how we can eradicate it and create safer online platforms for not only our young people but for us all. Thank you.